Hello and welcome to the agenda on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes and I'm joined by Phil Morehouse from A Different Bias. How you doing, Phil?
I'm
You
all
all right?
right, thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Right, so do you want to talk about Armageddon or do you want to talk about the Tories and their tax
Uh,
policies?
there's whatever. It's all the same thing.
Well, the thing is, the drums of war are more coming from like defence people from around Europe, in what seems like a bit of an organised grouping of people to say, "Listen, guys, if Trump wins the next election, then all bets are off."
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got to. I just my first video on this today. You've got to prepare for it. You know, it doesn't matter. It's all right saying Trump's unlikely to win. If he does win, he dismantles European defence overnight from next
Yeah,
January.
yeah.
So, and I've said for the longest time, Europe really shouldn't have been taking America for granted. They should always have been thinking, well, it's very nice having, basically the largest Western military sort of aligned with us. What happens when it's no longer aligned with us? And you can understand it because obviously governments want to reduce budgets where they can so they can boost it in other areas or have tax cuts, depending whether you're a conservative or a progressive government. But nonetheless, it's left us in a situation now where if America goes, Europe, like this incredibly wealthy continent, apparently can't defend itself against Russia, which has a tiny economy. Ridiculous.
Mm. Yeah. So what I wanted to get into today really was the fact that the Tories are gearing up for these tax cuts that are going to be announced next month. And I just wanted to get into how much is this going to tie Keir Starmer and Labour's hands once they take power, if they take power.
So Keir Starmer's already been sort of explaining this and saying that there is a sense in which it depends on exactly how they cut the taxes. So if it's income tax, the bottom line is from Labour's point of view, and obviously I don't know what their discussions are. From Labour's point of view, they just need to make sure they've got enough revenues coming in to fund their planned spending. And there can be a lot of focus on tax and stuff like that and income tax. Income tax is like a third of it or something like that. So if the Tories cut income tax, which will, the way they do it almost certainly would probably benefit ordinary working people. If Labour can go, okay, you've removed that from the budget. You must have intended, therefore, to make up the difference by taxing wealthier people more. And it doesn't mean putting up the rate of tax for wealthier people. There's an awful lot of people who do not pay the normal rate of tax. Now, on Question Time yesterday, which I don't watch any telly, but I always watch clips. People put clips on. And Question Time last night was a beauty. It was in Gillingham, which voted overwhelmingly Conservative in 2019, which means that 3 out of every 5 people in that audience was a Conservative voter. But when she asked the hands to go up for someone to defend Rishi Sunak, like one hand went up. But one person was explaining about what's happened over 14 years of Tory rule, and he was talking about NHS waiting lists. He was talking about a few things. And then when he mentioned corporations, half of all these massive businesses not paying their proper tax, there was a spontaneous round of applause from the audience. So that really hit a nerve, at least with a few. I mean, it wasn't the whole audience, but at least with a few people in the audience. They could have applauded any one of the points he was making, and that was the one.
Yeah.
So I thought there's a real case here for arguing that you don't need to increase the rate of any individual tax, whether it be VAT, income tax, national insurance, fuel duty, alcohol duty, whatever. If you just get people who are not paying proper tax to pay their taxes. When I mentioned something similar in a video this week, someone said on Twitter, obviously someone says things like this, you don't know it's true, but it is the sort of thing that does happen. And they said they were working for an American company in Sweden. And what their sort of parent company in America would keep doing was sending them an invoice for consultancy fees, which basically lowered their profits, which meant that lowered their tax liability. So you get fiddles like this all the time,
Yeah.
where you've got a company that's basically paying itself for some service in another country, which lowers its profits in that country, which lowers its tax liability in that country. There's all sorts of fiddles. And if Labour can just make sure people pay more of the money, the tax money they're supposed to be paying, you can actually get away with maintaining those tax cuts. So I
Yeah.
don't know. Is the simple? It's like how much tax do Labour think extra that they can generate by just better enforcement? Because then it might not tie them. Obviously, if what Labour cannot allow the Tories to do is to reduce the total tax revenue they're going to take in, and they're in government, because that's ridiculous. At the moment, you can argue about waste. Obviously, there's a lot of crony contracts going out for the Tories. If you get rid of those, all of a sudden you've got more money. But you can't. You need more than that. You cannot actually have the total tax revenue go down. So there are ways that Labour can deal with it, but I don't know what their internal discussions are as to what they would do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's very telling that I was just looking up Gillingham there. It's in Kent, and it was Labour till 2010. So it's been Tory for the last 14 years. And in the last election, they won by 10,000, more than 10,000 votes.
I think it was 61% of the vote.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, 61% of the vote. And so you're looking at that question time audience last night. And I like you, I didn't actually see the show. I was thinking of doing a show, on Labour Social, where we watch question time and comment on it as it's going, like Gogglebox, but it would be Quogglebox.
Sorry, what's that? Is that the sound of crickets?
Is that on? Is this on? Don't forget to tip your waitress. But yeah, it was absolutely remarkable that a sort of Tory, proper Tory shire is like this is
well, it's a bellwether one, like you say. It was Labour when Labour were last in power.
Yeah.
So it sort of flips between them. But as of the last election, it was Conservative voters, and because the BBC, in the interests of balance, make the audience reflective of the last general election vote, then what they had was a load of people who voted Tory in return for the various promises who are now really disgruntled. So it actually doesn't surprise me that these audiences are increasingly hostile to the Tories, because the Tories promised them things and didn't deliver.
Yeah. And also, I mean, there's the fact that like you've got so many people who have had their lives directly impacted negatively by this government. Like it's not just the usual suspects. It's not just the single mothers and the minorities and people like that. It's your middle class, upper middle class families are really struggling now. And I know that the level that they would struggle is slightly different to the level that everyone else would struggle. But even so, the fact that they're having to
no one votes to have their living standards go down.
Yes. Well, actually, no, because when people voted for Brexit, this came up a lot when we were arguing about, the pros and cons of Brexit. We heard this a lot with people saying, I would rather eat grass than stay in the EU. And so they knew there were people whose eyes were open to the fact that,
there weren't many of them. Most of them were the campaign. No one ran a campaign, leave the EU. We will make sure you have all the grass you can eat. They said, leave the EU. Your food will be cheaper. Your clothes will be cheaper. You will have better jobs, better pay. You'll have more money for the NHS. They were promised an increase in the standard of living. They were specifically promised an increase in the standard of living.
Yeah.
And they were then promised it again in 2019 by the Tories.
So is Jeremy Hunt's tax cuts that he's going to bring in, are they actually going to kick in time for anyone to notice? I mean, the big one he said is about what's it called? Not hereditary.
Inheritance tax.
Inheritance, that's what
I think
inheritance tax.
They're going quiet on that one. I think they realise that's not a vote winner for them.
Because hardly anyone has to pay it. I mean, and even if it was a significant number of people who did have to pay it, they're not going to have to pay it for years.
The thing is, there are a lot of people, a lot more people think that they would pay it than actually do. So it is the sort of thing where it's not completely, it's not on the same level as private school VAT, where the Telegraph are currently trying to they're trolling all these upper middle class people claiming poverty. We're not rich.
We're not
you
rich.
send your child to private school. Yes, you are rich then.
They only had 2 holidays last year in the Algarve.
Yeah.
Skiing.
It's utterly ridiculous. Like they'll say things like, "Oh, but we've had to." No, these people are saying, "Oh, but we have to sacrifice our holidays." It's like diddums. You're not sacrificing your holiday, by the way. You're choosing to spend your holiday money on private education.
Yeah.
Wealth, by definition, has more than you need. Wealth doesn't have to mean got a Rolls Royce. It doesn't have to mean you've got £1 million in the bank. It doesn't have to mean you've got a 5-bedroom detached house. It just has to mean that you've got it means that the month runs out before your money. If you've always got money left over from your income at the end of the month so you can put it aside, you are technically wealthy. Now, there are sliding scales there, but that's a fact. Wealth is having enough for luxuries.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's but something like the VAT, I mean, Labour are not interested at all. They're not chasing after those people. And everyone knows whether or not they pay private school fees. They know that. Yeah. Not everyone knows whether their children will be liable for inheritance tax, unless they look up the details of it.
It's £1 million tax free.
So although there's there's 4% of people would actually pay it. There's over 30% of the population think they will have to pay it.
Oh,
so there is that disparity.
This taps into
not a vote winner.
This taps into the whole no one thinks they're a poor person trope, doesn't it? Like the rich.
No one thinks they're a rich person, apparently.
No, but they do, because they're like, oh no, I'm rich, I'll have to pay that. And then when people in the left say we need to tax the rich, people go off. I don't want to be taxed. And like, well, you're not rich. There was a guy on Question Time. This was a couple of years ago now. He was he's earning 80 grand a year.
Yeah, and he was saying,
I'm not doing that. Well, I'm like, you're kidding me, aren't you? If that's how is that not enough money to live off? Like, seriously, do you have a coke habit, a gambling habit? I mean,
I know it's
how many houses do you need?
Yeah, I'll constantly get people from the south having a moan at me because, granted, £40,000 where in my sort of region in North Lincolnshire, you can live on that as a single person quite easily. I have done, and have plenty of money left over. Whereas in the southeast, no, you can't. So I do get that, but nonetheless, it don't matter where you live. There are people on minimum wage managing it. So someone on 80 grand can definitely manage it.
Yeah.
And if you're saying, oh, but you should see my outgoings, it's because you've got a big house. Like,
I
know it's more expensive. Housing is more expensive there. But when there are people on the minimum wage who are expected to live in that area, you on 80 grand can definitely do it. Get a smaller house.
Get a smaller house. Thank you very much to One Angry Pagan there for the super chat. Labour not committing to more council funds. ... Tactic. Is this?
They won't commit to any more. Look, it really is simple. The Conservatives at the moment have a budget, and every time if Labour say we will increase this budget or that budget or something like that, the Tories will say, well, hang on a minute, how can you do that without raising taxes? Right now, it's too complicated to say to people, well, for a start, we're going to cut out all the corruption, and for another, we're going to make people who are currently not paying their proper taxes do so. So because they know they don't really have much of a voice in the media, so it's just easier to say we're not going to commit. But we're not going to commit is not the same as we're not going to raise those funds. It's just saying we're not going to give the Tories an excuse to say we'll have to put up taxes, because the Tories and the Tory media break down economics so that it seems childishly simple. It's like, well, this is what we do now. This is the government spending now. If you were to increase it, inevitably means more taxes for you. It's like, well, no, on any level, that's not true. But that is the way people think. Therefore, just don't give them you just say, we're not committing to this, we're not committing to that, we're not committing to the other. And then in government, you go, right, okay, so all of a sudden now we are.
Yeah. So just thanks very much for the super chat. It's come up really small on the screen that's going out. It's broadcasting. It's because I've added some CSS to that bit of the page to make the text readable and clear, because it was a bit fuzzy before. And now it's made the super chats really, really small. So sorry about that. If you want to send me a tiny super chat, that'd be great. But you won't be able to see it, so I will read it out. But I just wanted to go on to something connected with all this about how unpopular the Tories are. This is a tweet from Edwin Haywood, who put this up, I think last night, and he said it's been an utterly abominable 24 hours for Brexit news. The UK gave up on negotiations to extend our trade deal with Canada, leaving us worse off than when we were an EU member. And apparently this was over cheese. They wanted a 245% tariff on cheese. New incoming border checks will add £200 million a year to the cost of our food and drink. MPs were warned that the EU's upcoming ETIAS/EES border systems may lead to 14-hour queues to enter the rest of Europe from Britain from the autumn. There were warnings of possible shortages of flowers for Valentine's Day because of the new incoming border checks. A plan to extend visas, I'm not finished, a plan to extend visas for British expats in France from 90 to 180 days was blocked by France's Constitutional Council Court, a decision which has no right of appeal. Rishi Sunak's pledge to ensure no future laws can create a border down the Irish Sea have gone down like a bucket of sick in TUV quarters and have set the blood pressure of the usual Brexiteers sky high. And the EU's plans to increase bulk medicine procurement across the bloc risk creating shortages in Britain because they have very significantly greater buying power than the UK does. So our medicine shortages
the thing is,
are looking like we're going to get worse.
Yeah. In terms of medicines, like when you point out we have critical shortages of quite a lot of common medicines in this country, and you'll get Brexit, but France have some shortages as well. It's like, at any one time, any country always has a shortage of some medicines. There's always issues with supply chains. But in France, it's like a couple dozen. In the UK, it used to be when we're EU members, it was like at any one time, there'd be 20 to 30 medicines for which we had a shortage. Now, it's dozens. It's over 100. It's like 150 or something. So the sheer scale of the issue, again, it's like, it's so binary for some of these people. It's like, oh, well, if France have this problem, then it's like, but it's way worse for us. And it's way worse than it used to be for us, more to the point. And all of these things, it's the same as the carbon dioxide shortage a couple of years ago, where you couldn't get Coca-Cola for love nor money because there was a CO2 shortage in Europe. Northern Ireland was fine for pop because they had access to the single market. So that these producers in Europe sold to those in the single market first. They supply us last. And it's not a conspiracy. It's not the EU Commission telling them to supply us last. It's just simple business. You supply anyone in the single market. You just have to send a dispatch note to them and a receipt. You supply the UK, then you've got to fill out all your customs paperwork, and very soon all your standards paperwork as well. So, and
if only someone had warned us about this, Phil. If only people have been making videos on YouTube banging on about what's going to happen if we Brexit.
Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to find a Brexit benefit in this, the Tories will it'll not be long. It'll not be more than a few years before they say, Brexit benefit. We've got too many old people anyway. So this shortage of medicine is quite a good thing. Yeah. Then someone will point out that's their
what Boris
voters,
Johnson said. That's what Boris Johnson said. He said the good innings. Thank
you
very much to Tinkinator. Sorry that your comments come up really small on the screen down there, but I got my national insurance tax cut yesterday. I'm £200 up per year technically, but worse off in real terms, inflation and fiscal drag. Although I can't see a GP or get an NHS treatment. Priorities, ..
Also, your energy bill's gone up. Don't know whether you noticed. Your energy bill went up, so that's wiped that out straight away.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, so when you're talking about their attempt at a bribe in March the 6th, I think the budget's going to be. So they did the national insurance cut in January this month because they expected to get a bit of a boost from that. Now, what I would have thought they'd have waited a bit, but apparently the Tories are already satisfied that it hasn't worked. Yeah. So they're now there was reports that Tory strategists are actually panicking a bit because they expected that to help them a bit. They didn't expect it to turn the polls around or anything, but they did expect to get a positive reaction from the public, and they haven't got that. So they're now thinking, right, we've spent 9 billion quid trying to bribe the electorate and it's not worked because actually Labour's lead. It's not that Labour's polling's gone up, it's that the Conservatives has fallen down. So the gap has widened.
Yeah.
And so now that's why they're now having to go back to the drawing board. So whatever they were planning to announce on the 6th of March, they're now rethinking it because they're thinking, right, our first plan didn't work. So they need this to work. They haven't got anything else. Yeah. They've got nothing else to try and sell to the public. It's tax cuts is all they seem to know. And the thing is, everyone should know they're going to put it back up. In 1992, the election they won, they cut taxes. And then later on in 1992, they put them back up again because they were unrealistic tax cuts. And they knew they were. It was literally an election bribe. And they put them straight back up. So Labour really should be pointing this out if they haven't already.
Well, they should be. I'll tell you who did point something out during the COVID pandemic. Nicola Sturgeon. She called Boris Johnson a fucking clown.
Well, he is. Let's be honest.
And said he was utterly incompetent, which he was.
Which he was.
And yet, there was a fantastic video that went out led by donkeys that was projected onto the Palace of Westminster this week, and it was about all of the dodgy appointees to our upper chamber in Parliament, and these are unelected lawmakers for life, and it's just a rogues gallery. They didn't even mention Ian Botham, who was only famous for that time that he once accidentally tweeted a picture of his own cock.
He's fairly famous for his cricketing exploits.
Cricket? What, did he play cricket?
Yeah, he's quite good at cricket.
Jurgen Klopp is stepping down as Liverpool manager.
I did actually taunt someone today. They were, because when
without Klopp.
when Klopp does step down, I'm very sorry to see him go. I very like Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, he's a good
but
lad.
When he does step down, it's going to be round about the time that Rishi Sunak's looking for a job. He seems to like his football.
No, I'm not even a Liverpool fan, and just no. But I think it's going to be a bit of an Alex Ferguson thing, where this manager who's been around for a while and won a lot of trophies and things retires, and then the replacement just
they get Wayne Rooney in,
isn't up to scratch. Yeah, Wayne Rooney. Get David Moyes in for a couple of weeks. Anyway, let's not talk about football. Just the wheels are coming off the Tory bus. Like, just in the most catastrophic way. Now, are you still feeling like it's going to be a May election, or do you think that's?
There's definitely an off ramp to autumn. I'm not saying it's definitely May. What I'm saying is they are definitely aiming for May. There are signs that there's an off ramp to November, and there was another sign this week. So with the standards controls coming in, remember, it's only certificates coming in next week, not checks. There's no checks. I need to keep emphasizing that. The checks are designed to come in from the end of April, and all checks that are going to happen from the end of October. And they've put back, so some of the checks that were supposed to be happening from 30th of April were going to be on fruit and veg. Now they've put those back to the end of October. And you think to yourself, well, if they were committed to a May 2nd election, why would they put them back? Because they'll be leaving it to be Labour's problem. So that sounds to me that they are accepting that there is a chance that they're still in government over summer, and the last thing they want is a summer of fruit and veg shortages. So that tells me that they are giving themselves the option of November. Also, the other thing that might arguably there's some things that this week I think have made May even more likely, and some things that made it less likely. One thing that's made it less likely, the fact that the Tory strategists are reported to be concerned that the national insurance cut hasn't worked. So they have based their strategy on, we'll do this thing, get a bit of a bounce in the polls, then we'll do this thing, that'll get us a bit of a bounce in the polls, then we'll call an election. So the national insurance cut already hasn't worked. 9 billion quid, not worked. So now they're planning on whatever, 20 billion, whatever, I don't know, of tax cuts, maybe a 1 pence cut in the income tax rate or something, just so they can say they've done it. If that doesn't work either, then what? Because there's a reason why the budget's been announced in the first week of March. That's not normal. Normally, it's announced mid to late March. So I've always said the reason they've done that is because I think the 26th of March is the last day you can call the election and have it on the May the 2nd.
Yeah.
So I think what they've done is they're having an early budget so they can gauge public reaction for a couple of weeks before making their final decision on whether
Yeah.
to go for a May election.
That makes sense.
So that tells me if their tax bribe doesn't work, if the polls are pretty much as they are now,
Yeah.
then actually they use that exit ramp and they just out of sheer desperation go for November. So I actually think on balance, the November election has become, I still think May is what they're aiming for, but I think the November election has become a bit more likely.
Right.
Just because their plans aren't working.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah. I can't argue with that. But I mean, I personally think it's gonna be worse for the Tories to cling on. I think they're gonna get decimated even more.
Absolutely. It will be pure desperation. It'll be praying for a miracle.
It's like someone dying on stage doing a comedy routine. You just want them to stop. Just get off the stage. Please get off the stage. Do you know what I mean? And the longer that they stay up there, just as everyone in the audience is just dying inside, would you please get off the stage? I just want to go back to Nicola Sturgeon for a moment because of a few other things that she said.
She didn't though. I got caught out. No, it was a parody. And the thing is as well, I was so ashamed when I did it, when someone pointed it out to me, because it does actually, it's made up to look like an actual political news, can't remember what you call it, account.
Bulletin.
But it does actually say in the bio it's satire.
But
I didn't check it because it looked so much like one I'm sort of used to seeing.
Well,
she didn't say them.
It went along with what's actually been reported in the newspapers about her saying about Boris Johnson, which I saw the select committee bit of.
Yeah, that was true.
Calling him an effing clown.
Yeah, that was true.
Yeah, so
the other ones were not.
So she didn't say that Matt Hancock was weaker than nun's piss, and that there's.
I mean, she may have done, but there's no evidence
as much use
of
as a marzipan dildo, and called Suella Braverman Shitler.
Yeah, I mean, she may have done all of these things, but there's no actual proof.
But there you go. And Carol Vorderman tweeted yesterday, trending in politics, we had Penny Mordaunt. Who had another moment of madness. She said, not just the leader of Britain, but the leader of Great Britain.
Yeah, well, representing Great Britain. To which I immediately go, not the UK then. Oh, have you told the DUP? Because they still seem to think you're on their side.
So there's three things trending on Twitter: is Penny Mordaunt, Broadmoor, and hashtag marzipan dildo.
Yeah. So
what a time to be alive. It is a bit crazy, isn't it? So I know this isn't usually what we talk about, but the International Court of Justice has just, in the last hour, have handed down their judgment. They have not declared that Israel is responsible for
Well, no, they
genocide.
can't. This is just an interim
That's
judgment.
going to take years. And they also haven't called for a ceasefire. They've underlined the fact that Israel needs to keep to its international obligations in war, to protect civilians. So I think both sides could probably see this as a victory.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, it's an interim report. Again, lots of people who don't know how international court rulings work they'll just draw conclusions. The reality is, what this was about, it wasn't about saying whether or not they have committed genocide. They basically have. If you read the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, is bleeding obvious. But what this is about is, as you can imagine, countries have beef with other countries all the time. And, you can't have a situation where you just keep accusing some country of some terrible international crime. So there's a process of weeding out the obviously false or vexatious lawsuits, basically. That's what this is. So the fact it hasn't been thrown out means there's merit to it. That is the take home from this. It was never about making the judgment. It was about, is this obviously false and just some politicking going on?
Yeah.
And the answer is no.
No.
There is actually a credible case to answer. That is
and Israel was trying to get this case thrown out, and it's been unsuccessful in that.
Yes. But I can understand people if they don't pay a lot of attention. I don't pay regular attention, but I have paid some attention. Obviously, we had our own little brush with these things some time ago, thanks to Blair. So I have sort of at times followed International Court of Justice rulings, and this is the first process. This is the first step. It's weeding out all the clearly ridiculous claims. It's basically going, don't be stupid, go away.
Yeah.
And they haven't done that. So it means that there is merit in it. There is merit in investigation.
Yeah.
But it is, if you look at the actual, again, too many people think they know what the word genocide means and then assume they know what the legal definition of genocide is. People should absolutely read what the legal definition is, and it could not be clearer. It absolutely is genocide, 100%. But then there's a lot of it going on as well. What Hamas committed genocide as well. That's also equally clear if you read the legal definition.
Oh yeah.
So
absolutely.
There's an awful lot of it, and there's too many people want to take one side or the other. But in actual fact, it's like they're both dickheads.
The Hamas are not the duly elected government of.
No, indeed.
I mean, they were elected about 20 years ago, and then they had a civil war.
Yeah, there's now about 7% of Gaza would have been involved in electing them.
Yeah, so they're not really duly elected leaders, whereas Netanyahu and his gang of lunatics are.
Yeah.
The duly elected leaders of that of a sovereign state, rather than. I mean, the idea of, I don't know, admonishing a terrorist group is like, they're a terrorist group. They're a prescribed organization. But
in this country they are. Internationally different.
Do you think that this will change Keir Starmer's approach now that it has been deemed credible that genocide is going on?
No, because he hasn't said it's not. Although the Conservatives, I think, are the ones who have dropped themselves in it a bit, because although, and I said in my PMQs video, Rishi Sunak did not say, as far as unless I missed it, but his answers seemed quite careful in that, just like the International Court here, he was urging Israel to honor international obligations. He didn't say that they were doing, and he didn't say they weren't. But David Cameron, I'm pretty sure I remember seeing him say that he thought that Israel was sticking by its international obligations a couple of weeks ago, which, is, I mean, in fact, it's clearly not. But something like this also, because what this interim judgment today says is there is a case to answer.
Yeah.
So a politician cannot come out and say, oh, no, it's all fine, because the International Court of Justice has said, well, we're not sure it is.
Yeah. It's just a bizarre set of circumstances, isn't it? That we're living now through this time. This was mentioned this morning on the James O'Brien show. There was a time, and this is back when I was studying my A-levels and doing my degree in politics and history. One of the things we covered is this the end of history? Are there going to be no wars after this? No, major conflicts, just maybe some civil wars bubbling over. And it did seem for a prolonged period that this could be it. We could be heading towards a world where, really? people, in the 90s.
I never understood that.
There was a concerted effort to try and bring peace rather than just.
I could never understand that, because at that time, in the 90s, we had the war with Iraq. Then in the noughties, we had another war with Iraq. And then Russia was like bombing the shit out of every neighboring country. And I was just thinking, was there really a time where people seriously thought that was it? Well, it was fairly obvious at any one time that the three major superpowers of Russia, China, and America have always been saber rattling. There's never a time when one of those countries or another isn't actually invading another country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's been that for decades.
So you could argue that, the Gulf War was what, 1991. So that was at the beginning of the decade. And that was actually technically before the actual collapse of the Soviet Union, which I think was in the summer of 91, I think. I don't remember. I was very little. But throughout the 90s, it did seem that there was a concerted effort, especially when we talk about the Middle East, to bring peace, to get people together and get them talking. We had the Good Friday Agreement in 98, and we also had, the Camp David Accords and everything. it looked like there was a roadmap to it, and then just I'm not saying that everything was going great, and there weren't loads of civil wars raging at that time in Africa, because there were, but it did seem to me that things were gradually getting better, even
Wasn't this
despite
the
9/11.
time? Wasn't this round about the time when Israel, Pakistan, and India suddenly got nuclear weapons?
That was the early 90s, yeah, I think.
Yeah. If this was an idea put forward, it passed me by.
Oh no, I mean
I find it incredible
I
that
didn't put it
people would
forward.
actually think that, given human nature and given the very obvious political instability around the world, and rogue states who were either acquiring nuclear weapons or were trying to, like North Korea and Iran, it would sound amazing to me that anyone could seriously suppose that this is it for that global peace, although it might be tentative, would be basically assured.
Well,
Absolute madness.
in 2009, when I was traveling to every country in the world, there wasn't a single country on the FCO website that said, "Do not go to any part of this country."
That just means we hadn't pissed them off.
No, it just meant that things weren't kicking off there at the time. I mean, obviously, when I went to Somalia, when I went to Iraq, when I went to Afghanistan, there were certain places that I could go to as fairly safely as a tourist. But those places aren't really there anymore either. I mean, I think since then we've really taken huge steps backwards in terms of global security and the quality of our leaders.
Well, we have. I'll tell you what might link in with this slightly. There's quite an interesting little chart gone up in the Financial Times today.
Ooh,
and
charts.
It's high. And this, I must emphasize, this is for young people. This is for 18 to 29-year-olds specifically. So it's like looking at where the younger generation are thinking. And it maps like social attitudes. So the positive axis is like liberal attitudes, and the negative axis is conservative attitudes. And it shows in these 4 countries a widening gap between men and women on these issues. I mean, the interesting one is actually the UK there. So both men and women have more liberal attitudes than they did, ironically, when Labour were in power.
Can you bring that a little bit to your right? We can't quite see the.
What have you done?
There you go.
That's
it. No, your head's in the way. It's all right.
Yes. There we go. Right. So, I mean, the UK, quite bizarre out of this one, both men and women have more liberal attitudes, a lot more than when Labour in power. But the gap between men and women has been huge. And like in South Korea, it's gone completely topsy-turvy. Men have gone from being quite liberal or fairly liberal to ultra conservative. And these, remember, are just the younger generation. This is specifically 18 to 29-year-olds. That's all it is. Men have suddenly become way more conservative and women a bit more liberal, but the gap between them in all of these countries has widened.
Wow.
And in every single case, it's women becoming more liberal and men either not becoming quite as liberal or actually becoming actively more conservative.
So red going up is liberal.
So there's huge gender gap in social attitudes. And when you consider that in all of these countries, the legislatures are going to be by and large men, so that's quite interesting. Potentially quite worrying as well, because this, as I say, is the young generation. Especially worrying in South Korea, more so than in the UK.
That's crazy for South Korea. And their chart only starts in 2005, whereas the US starts in 1990, Germany in 1980, and the UK in 1990. So that is what happened in 2016 in South Korea.
That was the Me Too movement.
Oh, really?
So what it caused was an awful lot of women to sort of reevaluate relationships, and then with some men there was a bit of a reaction potentially against it.
Yeah. But it's good in the UK that the men have become more liberal as well as the women. It's just there's more of a gap
it's been, whereas they were close together. If you look, because the important thing, there was a time in the past when they were sort of roughly in step, and now there's this massive gap widened, and it's in all of these 4 countries. I was going to say Western country, you can't really call South Korea, but it's sort of more aligned with West than East, I suppose, in many ways, because of its closeness to the United States.
Nick says blame it on OnlyFans. So there you go. What's if you want to take that down, Phil, so we can see it. There you go. That's better. So you don't look like you're wearing a chart for a hat. Unquiet Spirit did actually say, I like Phil's graph hat. Phil really needs to say, I'm Batman. Anyway, no.
Susan Hall was doing that today.
Oh, no. What was she doing now?
Oh, it's hilarious.
No.
So she was trying to have a pop at something Sadiq Khan did like 5 years ago. Let me find it. Absolutely hilarious. So where was it now? I'll find it. It can't be that long ago. So she says, this is her tweet. Are you a quiet bat person? Sadiq Khan hopes you are, which is why he spent your money on a project called We're All Bats to encourage Londoners to listen like bats. How much money do you think he spent on that? Comment below. So I looked it up. Apparently it was like this drama group or something that got a £20,000 grant in 2019 from London. And I was thinking, well, first of all, if we're going to be having a pop at like cultural money being spent, I mean, what about Boris Johnson with Jennifer Curie? But I did have to reply to this. I'm thinking, Susan Hall, right? I mean, she's already quite well known for having a bit of a shaky grasp on reality. Does she really, a few weeks away from the mayoral election, really, does she really want to open up by saying to the public, are you quiet bat people? Because I'm quite sure the vast majority of people looking at that tweet will not know what the hell she's on about. So she can already be described as a little bit insane. That's not helping her. Even though she thinks she's trying to make a point, that is not helping her.
Charlie's written, Susan Hall, my policies are: 1, I am the only one who can beat Khan. 2, Khan is scared of me. 3, I will beat Khan. 4, vote for me and I'll beat Khan. 5, all of the above. The Tory mayoral candidate who has nothing to offer.
She's absolutely the fact that it's like the Conservatives aren't even taking the election seriously, that they could present her as their she should never even been shortlisted, quite frankly. Yeah, she's mad.
Yeah, but I think they're just relying on the whole Trump thing of like Trump should never have been nominated for the Republican nominee, and he shouldn't have done 3 times in a row. They've gone for him.
Yeah. Well, he's now established. The Republican Party is now his cult, so it's like they're knackered. They're gone. There's so few that there's like Mitt Romney is now he's now like one of the few that will stand up to him. There's hardly any, because there's some that actively like what he's selling, and there are others that are just scared. They just know that he's in control now.
Indeed. Another story I picked up on this on this morning's Morning Brew quite a lot, so we don't need to talk about it that much. But it looks like Michelle Moan and Doug Barrowman. I keep calling him John Barrowman. He's out of Doctor Who. Doug Barrowman. They've had their assets frozen, £75 million, and this is a small amount of their actual fortune. How much money do these people have?
Well, I mean, they own yachts, so
they bought a house in Belgravia for like 10 million, and they're trying to sell it for 25 million like 2 years later.
Yeah,
it has a cinema with purple carpet, apparently.
I do like purple.
Do you think that they are going to see the inside of a jail cell?
I think they're fearing it. I don't know whether they are or not. I can't possibly say, but I think they're fearing it. I think that's why they all of a sudden, out of the blue, massively ramped up this PR campaign, which has like gone down like a lead balloon. But I think they're fearing consequences.
Has she wheeled out the Wrath of Khan line yet? That's from Nick. That'd be really funny when he wins the election this year and she's standing outside. Khan! So we've got the Wrath of Khan and we've got Starmageddon, which is when the Tories get absolutely wiped out, cataclysmically. The Wrath of Karen says Duke Vengeance. Yeah, very much. Moan had her face frozen, Graham. Like Walt Disney, and that was his head. And Moan is the only one they'll bother doing. All the rest will be ignored. That's something that did you say this where you think
Well,
that they'll be held up as sort of like, oh look, we did something about it. And
I
let
think
people
that's the
just screw off
Tories'
the ball.
plan. But what I also think is this investigation seems to be going on for a bit. And, later this year, at some point, there's going to be a Labour government. And it makes no sense for them to cover for them. Why would they? Or indeed anyone that's involved. Why would they? So, yeah, the Tories' involvement in this is going to end within a matter of months either way. Just don't know how many months.
Yeah. Hugh is saying
And
that
also Labour want to, they've specifically mentioned as a policy commitment, they want to recover all the proceeds of the frauds. So of course they have to go after them. It's basically their policy.
Yeah.
If they're going to recover the money, you've got to go after the people who've got it.
Hugh is educating us that the Belgravia house was in bad shape and they spent millions rebuilding and refitting it out, hence price more than doubling. I mean, I just assumed that it was a shell before then. But it's kind of terrifying that people have this much money when they're so goddamn stupid. And I just think, I'm not stupid. How come I don't have loads of money?
Because you've got some scruples, as I say.
Well, I was going to say it's because I'm not evil enough, Phil. I need to be more evil.
And also, I'd be a shit entrepreneur because even if I had a great business brain and a great business idea, I would make so much money, then I'd just retire.
Yeah.
I would never be driven to make tens of millions. As soon as I have enough to retire in comfort, I would just stop.
Yeah.
So I've got completely the wrong mindset.
No, I just want everyone to have a good time. That's my problem. So yeah, how dare I? I'm always happy when people are just having, a nice time. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want that. They're just like, oh no, I want everyone to be miserable, and for me to be the only rich person in the entire country.
I mean, I don't get, and I genuinely don't get this. I get greed. I understand greed. That makes sense. We're all greedy for something. What I don't get is when people have a certain amount of money and income that allows them to be able to have a standard of living that they are happy with. And any further sums of money that they're making don't actually increase their standard of living. It's just like, it's like playing a trading computer game where it's just like the scores going up. Yeah. It was like playing Elite. There came a point where you bought everything you could buy for your ship and anything extra was just a score. Yeah. And it's like, but in real life, how does it make sense to do that? To like inflict misery on others? It doesn't help you. Like Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's like incredibly wealthy, or Rishi Sunak. More money isn't gonna, they're living a life of luxury. In fact, actually, they're giving themselves minor privations by having to occasionally talk to ordinary people at election time. So why? I don't understand. That's what I don't get, because that's beyond greed. Because they already have what they want. It's like the money itself doesn't do anything for you. Money is just something that allows you to get what you want. They've already got what they want.
Yeah, so but it hasn't made them happy. It hasn't made them happy, and so they have to find other things that might make them happy. That's why so many people just come off the rails.
Jacob Rees-Mogg will never be happy. You only have to look at that photo when he was a younger man with his nanny. That man is never going to be happy in his entire life.
I thought that was a publicity shot for like the Omen 5 or something.
Oh, but that is a man who has never been happy and is never going to be happy.
I was thinking, once you've got the auto dock thing for elites, you don't have to manually try and get in the little slot for the space stations. You sorted, aren't you? Sorted for life. Get your auto dock sorted, and you can listen to the Blue Danube by
yes, indeed.
Debussy? No, is it who wrote the Blue Danube? Someone tell me in the chat.
Was it Strauss or someone?
Strauss. It was Johann Strauss, I think. Maybe, I don't know. Might be making that up. Richard Strauss. I don't know. Someone tell me in the chat. There was not a story about Sunak, the hedge fund, and Moderna.
Oh yeah.
That. What's that about? Quick, fill us in.
Well, everything. Like literally, everything that Rishi Sunak has done as Chancellor or as Prime Minister has coincidentally managed to improve his or his family's, shareholdings in something. So he has like, obviously is worth like himself, never mind his wife's fortune. He personally is worth $250 million.
Yeah.
Inevitably, he didn't just get that with deals as a banker. He has invested a lot of it. And he's made sure that in government, the government have invested a lot of public money in companies in which he's got interests. And that included the money they spent on vaccines. He made sure that he made money out of it.
It's very typical though, isn't it? Because you got to ask that question: why would someone who's worth £700 million take a job that pays 130,000 a year?
Yeah. I mean, I don't rule out that there are some people who can become very, very wealthy, much wealthier than him, and want to pay something back. So I don't automatically say that's a dodgy situation. I can quite believe that someone who's that wealthy could decide to go into politics to like give something back. He just didn't. Like you wouldn't join the Tory party to do that.
No.
And he hasn't. He's done it to make himself even wealthier.
It's a sad state of affairs, really, isn't it? And Puninator says, Phil, I believe that some of them are genuinely believe in their financial agenda.
Oh, they do.
Like Truss is crazy, but I believe she is honest in her belief of trickle down economics.
Yes, well, I do. I think she's that stupid.
She's not part of the top elite. She's a
no, but she's been got at by the IEA.
Yeah.
So they've persuaded her of things. You got to remember, Tory. It's not like there's the public who are being hoodwinked by the Tories, and then the Tories who all know and they're all cackling evilly, going, ha, ha, ha. They fool themselves. They con themselves. Tory MPs are also Tory voters and Tory supporters. So yes, some of them will be shown. Otherwise, how can you explain how they've allowed successive leaders to steer them down the wrong path? If Tory MPs were completely self-aware, there is no way they'd have held on to Boris Johnson as long as they did. I get how they'd make him leader to win the 2019 general election and get Brexit done. Yeah. They should have dropped him very quickly after that. It's obvious he would actually start to be a problem for them very soon afterwards. They held on to him for too long because they didn't have anyone else. They never would have allowed Liz Truss to get onto that final ballot if they were self-aware. They wouldn't believe that Rishi Sunak was really the person to go for, because he had a lot of support, genuine support. None of these things would have happened. And they wouldn't have allowed him to steer them in obviously the wrong direction all of last year if they were self-aware. So, no, I absolutely accept that most Tory MPs really don't have a clue what they're talking about. Most Labour MPs don't when it comes to it. Most MPs don't. They're just people. They're just people who had the support of half a dozen active members of their local party group.
Yeah. Do you think that this week we had Simon Clarke, didn't we, joining the voices, doubling the voices, I think, because there's only two.
It was basically because everyone else told him to shut up.
Him and Andrea Jenkins. That's it.
Well, even Liz Truss. I mean, Simon Clarke is basically a Liz Truss acolyte, and even she basically said, "Yeah, this isn't the right time for this."
Yeah. But I mean,
so even figures on the far right were, I mean, obviously some were just observing silence, but others like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Priti Patel, Liz Truss, they were basically going, "Will you stop it?"
It's but it's got to the point now where you kind of like they just can't, can they? They just can't change him. It's too late.
Well, it is too late, and most of them know that. Although I'll tell you what is interesting in terms of the old plot. And unfortunately, I'd already recorded the video on it before I knew this. David Frost. So, in that MRP poll, so it was a group of Tory donors of names unknown.
Mm.
David Frost has got to reveal who they are. Otherwise, the Tory party is going to kick him out of the party.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool. When did this happen?
He's got to say who they are. I said, I'm not ruling out it being Labour donors. Such is the damage it's done. I suspect it's not. It's more likely to be Reform UK or Brexit Party donors, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got to reveal because there was a bit of an investigation by the BCP, which monitors polling companies, and they investigated YouGov because obviously it's a bit dodgy. Oh, we've done this commission for these people. Who are these people? We're not saying. That's a bit dodgy.
Yeah.
So they have to make sure that they didn't produce the poll themselves, that it was an actual commission, which they have satisfied them it was. They've proved that it was an actual commission, but the BCP have no powers, they say, to investigate exactly who it is, as long as they can, as long as it's proven that the polling company had a commission, they were paid to do it, then that's all there needs to be. But the Tories are obviously the Tory leadership are not happy with it. It's a clear attempt to destabilize them. So they've gone, according to the Independent, they've gone to David Frost. Who are these people? And he's gone, oh, I'm not telling you. Right, well, we're going to kick you out of the party. Oh, bollocks. All right, I'll tell you. So
have you got the feed up? Can you see the feed that's coming through? I've got a perfect picture. This is a picture that accompanied a story about Simon Clarke this week in The Guardian, and it just shows how absolutely tiny Rishi Sunak is. He looks like a bloody hobbit.
But I don't pick on people's physical appearance or anything like that. At the end of the day,
it just made me laugh, that particular picture.
But he is. I mean, you look at any picture of him; it looks like he's with a giant or something. He always looks like, when he's shaking hands with anyone, that he's congratulating on someone for winning the Guinness Book of Records for the world's tallest man or woman. But that is just the way it is.
Larry the Cat says, "Who said UBI? I thought it was on Max's channel for a moment there. I firmly believe in UBI. I've talked to Max on his channel about this. It's something that I think that is inevitable." But first of all, we need to get rid of these lunatics out of government. But I'm a bit concerned about that. Those charts that you just showed us, Phil, showing that there's this big because I've only seen basically the mixed results, which are the younger generation. So that chart was what, 18 to 29, was it? Yeah, 18 to 29-year-olds. I've only seen it overall with both sexes, and so it's been this trend towards becoming more liberal as they get older. Same with millennials, getting more liberal as they get older. But it does seem that there is a definite breakaway there of men who are unhappy about women getting more rights and more recognition. And
I'd say the UK one is more encouraging, although there's a slight downward tick on men at the moment in the UK. It has also increased, whereas in all those other countries over the last 10 years, liberalism has gone down with men. It's gone up in women and down with men. Whereas with the UK, it's gone up with both men and women.
Yeah.
It's just that at the moment, in fact, you could argue the women is sort of flatlining. A slight downward tip with the men, which may not be part of a long-term trend.
Yeah.
So actually, it's for the UK, it's more. You could look at that as being quite encouraging. It's just that there is still this widening gap between men and women.
Yeah, because when you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And men are privileged because we're privileged in ways that we don't really think about. Like, we don't have to worry about getting home on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
We can walk, take a taxi. Who cares? If the taxi driver tries to pull a knife on you, you probably kick it out of his hand and sumo wrestle his head to the ground. Anyway, you think I'll be able to handle myself, and you don't even think about it. And I didn't even think about it until it was pointed out.
I have sometimes, though. Now, I will say I have sometimes. There have been times, I particularly remember doing this. There was a particular car park I used to use in Grimsby sometimes. And there were times where if sort of late-ish at night, not after night out or anything, if it was dark or anything, if I was walking back to go to get my car or something like that, and if there was a woman walking on her own, I would make the point of not walking on the same side of the road as her, because I have been conscious for a long time that women may not feel safe. So there have been times when I've sort of avoided looking like I might be up to no good and making women fear that I might be
I always think
intending harm.
If I'm ever walking down the street and at night and there's a woman walking in front of me, I always cross the road to the other side because I know what it's like when you're walking and you feel like someone's catching up behind.
Well, like you say, I don't bother. I don't care. But I am conscious of the fact that women might.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible to actually think that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's. I think a lot of men have got to the point where it's like some people are just like, all I've got to feel proud about is the fact that I'm British, and they go on about it all the freaking time, and they go on about 2 world wars and 1 World Cup, none of which they had anything to do with, and like that's their entire life to them. And now it's even worse. It's not even like your accidental geography of birth. It's your accidental sex. It's like, are you a man? Yes, well done. Here, have a participation trophy for being born male. And yeah, kind of painful. Anyway, right, I'm gonna head off now. To get some more stuff done. I'm trying to make a moment of truth that hopefully I'll get out tonight before the Labour Social at 9:00, which Phil's not going to be joining us for, are you, Phil? Got better things to do.
I have. I'm off out.
I thought you were going to surprise me then and say, actually, Graham, I've decided to stay in and talk to you clowns.
Gonna roll dice.
Oh, well, I'll be here at 9:00 for the Labour Social. It might be the Labour Anti-Social if I can't get anyone else to come on board with me, but I'm sure I will. I'll put the feelers out and see who would like to join us. I would love you to join us watching this, and bring in your chat, and your banter is always welcome. So we'll see you at 9:00 tonight here on Labour Social. And until then, thank you very much, Phil. Thank you very much, Phil.
Bye-bye.
Phil's already doing his next show. He's gone already. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.